right, Sheena, here we are for another episode of Magical Experiments, and we've already had Noctua join us. Welcome, Noctua.
Welcome.
And today we are going to be talking about threshold magic, observing the year of the fire horse and the Lunar New Year, and also paying attention to, of course, eclipses.
And I think we're going to unfold into a lot more. I think some explorations about being in the threshold versus just passing through.
Well, it does sound like a tower time kind of
Oh my
topic.
God. Yes. Yes, yes.
Well, and I mean, I actually had an experience of that today. Um, it was really powerful. There was this moment where it was kind of like I've made a choice to go back to full-time work while I'm continuing to work on the foundations of magical experiments as well as my other business, Sovereign Submission. Um, and it's an adjustment, it's a choice. And so today I got the final confirmation that I landed the job. And on the one hand, I was happy, and on the other hand, I experienced some grief.
Mm.
And there was just this really interesting moment of like being in that threshold and allowing myself to feel that tower energy come through and giving voice to that grief. Not because I had done anything wrong or that I'd lost anything, because I really haven't, but because it was change. And it was allowing, in this case, my inner 7-year-old to come out and express himself, because really this was touching on a much the incident itself wasn't even a bad thing. It was just touching on a really deep wound and a fear of abandonment and loss that I needed to experience in the moment. So it was a very powerful threshold. And it looks like we had Cunning Folk Media join us. Welcome.
Yeah. So, what do you consider the threshold, or what is a threshold moment? Um,
Mm. I think a threshold moment is when we come to that space where we're crossing over from one space to another. Like a threshold moment could, if we look at it from like a literal perspective, a threshold moment could be I'm stepping through a door, right?
mhm.
The door is the threshold, whether that's the door into your home or the door into a room or something else along those lines. A threshold could also be a moment of time. For example, when I wake up in the morning, from sleep, that's a threshold. Or if I'm going into the kitchen to cook, it's a physical space, but it's also a temporal space. Like I'm going into a specific instance. And so that becomes the threshold that shapes the experience. What about you? What do you think of or define as thresholds based on what I've just shared, and like if you disagree with it or go in a different direction?
No, I love thresholds. I often say that I'm usually in one or another. I think pretty much everything in its own way can be a threshold. I love threshold magic. I love linking things to going through thresholds and using that as part of my magical practice, especially like in my creative magical practice when I'm coming into my office. Like, oh, that was one of the challenges that we did like way, way, way back was having to come up with our own ritual. And the threshold ritual of coming into my magical space, my altar space, the heart of our house, has been really impactful. Uh, Doing the dream magic that we do, like that hypnagogic state between awake and dreaming, the thresholds of being in flow state, and I think that there's a whenever there is change, there is a threshold involved at some point. And part of it is learning how to observe that. And part of it is really allowing ourselves to be in it. I think one of the misconceptions that we have in our, we have to get from here to here in our very linear way of being is that we have to cross the threshold. We have to cross it. We have to do it faster. We want to get to the other side of something. And I think what we're really discovering collectively right now is that we're going to be in this threshold state for a while. There is a lot of things that we took for granted that we just accepted as reality are now crumbling. So part of the challenge then becomes how do we be in the threshold for as long as it takes? And that's kind of where I'm hoping we can direct our call today.
Mm. Before we do that, I want to share something. So the other night, it was I think Tuesday night, wasn't it? Was that when the Lunar New Year? I think it was.
Don't ask me linear time questions.
Okay. Well, we're in the threshold right now. Well, the other night I decided to paint this mask. And there we go. You can kind of see my eyes through it now. Um, and this mask is a mask for the year of the fire horse. I had actually put this is a paper mache mask, and I put it together originally in January. I took some images and words, and you can see like there's words on here, and then there's words on the inside as well. I didn't paint the inside of the mask, and I chose that on purpose, not to. But the words basically were kind of like what did I want for this particular year of the fire horse? And I think it's interesting, like we have the Julian calendar of so like December 31st, January 1st, and it's the new year, right? Then we have like this lunar new year that really we've just kind of I think the entire world is kind of appropriated from a culture, but there it is. It's just become kind of part of the cultural parlance, and people talk about it. And it's like, well, okay, so there it is. So I thought I would create this. I painted this the other night, and this is what I came up with as part of this threshold exploration, the magic of the threshold. And I found it to be a really powerful moment when I created it. And of course, I created it with you because you and I were on the phone together while I was creating it, and we even did a little ritual. Now, what we didn't do is we didn't work with the eclipse energy. We were very careful about that, and I think that there's a reason for that. So why don't we talk a little bit about that and then go further into this topic of thresholds? Why didn't we work with the eclipse energy, Sheena?
Because we learned our lesson last time. Oh, yeah. Um, and I would just like to invite anyone who receives comments, get involved, share your favorite thresholds or the threshold magic that you do. It's such a pleasure to be able to learn from and share with each other.
Yes, we love comments and questions. That is are heartily encouraged, as Noctua knows, because she did a boo right there at the beginning.
Yeah. Eclipse energy is very interesting. There's a lot going on with it astrologically. Uh, from an energetics perspective, when we're also working with multidimensionality and different spirits and things like that, it's just a lot of energy, and it tends to amplify things. And especially with the work that we do collectively, it amplifies a lot of the collective's energies, which can be very powerful, especially with this what we're experiencing right now. Um, it's really good to be intentional about any magic that you're doing.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is. I think what's interesting with the eclipse is that it kind of holds contradictory energies in a way.
Mhm.
And so there's that aspect of like, well, how do we hold that and make space for it? And so what I found is that the best way I can make space for that and be in that threshold is to actually not do really anything like overtly huge or magical with it. It's interesting because like when I've done eclipse work in the past, if I've done it with other people, inevitably there's conflict that has come out of it or something weird has occurred. And and weird outside of the normal weirdness of occultism, because there's of course weirdness and then there's weirdness. So eclipse weirdness is that second layer of weirdness that comes through. And of course, I mean, for anyone who wants to do magic during the eclipse, like, hey, go for it, have fun, do what you want to do. Like, I'm always a big fan of like discover for yourself the experiences that you need to have because that's part of this whole thing. But I also think it's really powerful and relevant that we kind of speak to the reality that like sometimes with threshold work, it's like do we have to even do anything magically with the threshold or not? We don't necessarily need to. Like today, my experience of the threshold, the biggest thing I needed to do was to allow the emotions to move through instead of holding on to them. And in the past, where I would have held on to them and let them become like a form of stuckness and blockage, I just allowed the emotion to move through. I let my inner 7-year old out. He cried. He had his moment, and now he is quietly bouncing a ball deep inside me, having some fun there and feeling at peace, which is a good thing. I got him.
Yeah, and we're in so many collective thresholds right now. Um, this is kind of going into Tower Time, which is at the editors right now, which I'm really excited about because it has been a labor and labor and labor and labor of love. Um, but you can't talk about Tower Time on being Tower Time energy without experiencing all the towers in your life. Um, and we've had quite a few. And the whole second half of the book is all on looking at an understanding of our collective towers and our societal and cultural towers, and really that the whole castles and the whole underlying structures of reality that we have been born into and agreed that this is reality. And what I've been really sitting with today is like the falling down of so many different um, parts of the tower simultaneously. Um, whether that like in the spiritual circles and things coming out with the Epstein files and things coming out in trauma work and um, different methodologies that are talking about that are, just incorrect, that people have built careers and lives and worked with clients around, and then, the fall of the guru influencers, and it's just there's so many aspects right now, like even a lot of the shadow work practices that we learn and we practice, we're like, oh, okay, well, this was appropriated from this, or the teacher is not reflecting their their core tenets and what they share with people. And I think that this ongoing like crumbling and destruction is ramping up, and a large part of that is the energy that is happening right now. The astrological weather, the everything with Saturn and Mars and Uranus and everything that's happening right now. It's like the collective foundations of what we have accepted as reality is really starting to rot, crumble, explode. And like we talk about in the book, it's like how there's this instant, like there's a vacuum and we instantly go, okay, how do we fix this? Either how do we save it or how do we like just destroy it even more and bring in something new? But we're in that like really kind of painful part in the middle where like we just have to be in the threshold. And the threshold has got to get wider before, and we have to just be in it. And that was really present today.
Mm. Yeah, it was present today. I think here's what I kind of find is that sometimes like we really don't need to do anything. The tower will fall
Mhm.
regardless. In fact, sometimes the more we do, like if we try to keep the tower from falling, I've certainly done this before. It's like, no, that tower is going to fall. It's better to just ride it and be in that threshold, be in that comfortable place of discomfort and be able to really move with it because you'll come out the other side. One way or another. You'll come out the other side. And that's the thing that I think a lot of people kind of get stuck on is that they want to try and control the fall of the tower. They want to control the threshold. They want that experience to be something that is like concretized in a way where it's just
Mhm.
like it's locked in stone.
Yeah.
But things aren't always locked in stone. Sometimes we just have to be open to the going with the flow and letting the threshold come apart, knowing that we can handle that.
And I think the key is that we handle that in community. there's such a there's such a like, in this moment, there's kind of that instinctual drive to spiritually bypass, or to just pretend this isn't happening, or, to say, to, like, try to either just completely say, "Well, this isn't my reality," or to separate ourselves from being, like, in the situation, in the threshold as it's happening. Like, we're doing all of these kind of mental gymnastics, or things to not be sitting here. And I think that that is a great disservice to us and our power as magicians. Like, we're kind of built for these times. Who else is better to cross the threshold to be that steadiness?
I agree with that, and I think there's a kind of inertia in a way, right? There's, like, this sense of, like, "Oh, I've gotta be in this space. Like, I don't wanna be in this space. I wanna get out of it," and yet the thing is I can't really think of a time in history where there hasn't been some level of uncertainty or threshold or whatever. Like, there's really not, like, anyone who looks back on history and says, "Oh, like, that was the golden age," or whatever, it's like, well, not really. I mean, I grew up in the '80s, and I remember growing up with kind of the thing of, like, well, someday there could be a nuclear war
Mm,
because, it was during the Cold War era, and even, like, getting drills and training around that. So it's like, it's easy to romanticize the past and to romanticize the idea that there were never hard times, and yet there are definitely, like, it kinda comes with the territory. It's what we do with it that matters.
yes. So, what is some magic that we can be doing? Threshold magic that we can be exploring with or playing now?
Well, I shared one example, which was the mask.
Hmm.
I think observing a threshold and giving it a shape and form to work with and turning it into an opportunity that extends out past the threshold itself. I mean, in a very real sense, like, we've entered into the year of the fire horse. That was a threshold moment. And, like, what can we do to move with that energy as it goes throughout the rest of the year? That's an example right there. Like, we can purposely work with it, or we can choose not to work with it, but then it works with us. It's such a prevailing part of our consciousness, like in the very real sense of the word. Like, all the things I've seen about people talking about the year of the fire horse and all this other stuff, that energy's already there. So that's an example right there. And I'd be curious for either Noctua or Cunning Folk Media, if you have any ideas or suggestions, feel free to drop those in. Again, we love comments and questions. What about you? What's a threshold magic that you've done in the past, Sheena?
Mm. I mean, a lot of the threshold magic that I do is in and around dreaming, lucid dreaming, uh, active dreaming. I love just the really basic threshold of, um, like, I have threshold magic set up in my house. So, um, one of the things that I like to do in, working with the spirit of the house or the spirit of the place that I'm in is creating, little triggers of, like, energetic intentions that get set when a certain action occurs. And then you set them up, and as long as the action is still occurring, it's kind of keeping this trigger intact. So, I have one at my front door. Um, One is kind of protection because we do not have a security system, and there's postal issues sometimes. Um, and I've never had a problem, which has been fabulous. But also just to, like, infuse what um, the energy that I want to have in my house. So that's something that I like to do. Um, and every time we are going into a trance state or we're going into a deep meditation, those are thresholds. I think one of the most ooh, Noctua is a mirror threshold. That's an interesting question, and it totally just took my mind this way. Um, yes, yes, yes. But yeah, no, my mind's there now. Yes, Taylor, what do you think about mirrors and thresholds?
Mm. Well, I definitely think a mirror is a threshold. I mean, look at scrying, right? Why do we use scrying? We use scrying as a way to cross a threshold, to connect on a threshold with the spirit. Whether you're using when you're using a scrying mirror, right? That's a good example of that.
Mhm.
I have one like that at home and here, and it's a very, very powerful form of magic. That threshold, of the mirror. Some people will even say like, don't like sleep in a room with a mirror, or don't have like a mirror unveiled. I will admit I do have a mirror in my room, in my bedroom, and I don't sleep with it covered because it would be impossible to, because it's a closet mirror. So it's like the whole thing. So it's just like trying to cover that each night. No, I'm not going to do that. I've never had any issues with sleep, but I do think it's an interesting thing to observe. And I mean, I think that, mirror work in general, like with magic, can be very powerful, whether you're working with a spirit or doing some other form of magical work, which is one of the reasons why I like to integrate mirrors into different forms of magical workings, because of the way it creates kind of this, like, you're walking across different realities as a result.
Yes. And as we're walking across different realities, circling back, threshold guardians, spirits of the thresholds, and developing a relationship with them, whether that is a dream guardian or, there's many examples of threshold guardians, spirits, in pretty much every tradition, and getting to know the guardians of your thresholds are one of the most important things you can do.
Hmm. That's true. But I'm curious as to where your thoughts are going with mirrors and thresholds. Like, you asked me the question, but then you're like, "Oh, I went into a different direction. You're leaving us hanging here."
No, the direction was all the way circling back to our threshold guardians.
Okay, well, so what would be a good threshold guardian then?
Hmm. Well, if you are kind of working more in the Greek um, pantheon, any of the psychopomps, Hermes, Charon, um, any of the Chthonic gods, um, there is your own personal threshold guardians that you may choose to work with. One of the most interesting one is get to know the guardian of your subconscious and your unconscious. So especially if you're doing shadow work, there and again, it can take many different forms depending on your background, your experience, the different methods that you use. But the guardian of your unconscious, for doing shadow work, for like really being able to explore that and call that forth. It might be a part, if you're familiar with parts work. It might be a version of yourself from the past or the future. But that can be a really interesting exploration.
Mhm. I think for me that I would look at like a threshold guardian as like a spirit of boundaries. So Saturn would be a great example of a
Yeah.
threshold guardian,
Yeah.
because of of like what of the embodiment of that particular energy, and like what it does. And then that kind of comes to like, well, then how do we negotiate or work with that threshold guardian? Because sometimes that is part of the process, right? If we're going to cross the threshold, we're going to come up to The threshold guardian. I chose the word "to" very purposely. I could have said "come up against," and that would change the entire meaning, but I don't think that we need to come up against, we just need to come up to, and so then it's kind of like, well, how do we come up to that threshold guardian and form a relationship with it?
Absolutely. Does always come back to being in a relationship, doesn't it?
It does. Mm.
Yeah.
Lacto says Hecate can travel through all three realms like Hermes. Yep, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so fascinating to even experience and witness yourself as you just go through your day and notice the thresholds in your life. Whether that is going through a door, whether that is a conversation, whether that is going in and out of dream state or um, going in and out of meditation, the thresholds that you have to cross in order to be with other people. Even, in some ways, our technology can be a threshold. So it's kind of like an invitation just to be really curious and to see how you can start playing with them and experiencing them in different ways.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. Maybe one of the most powerful things that we can do is just learn to be comfortable with how that threshold guardian might share some insights or wisdoms around the threshold and around like what's occurring in the threshold that could help us move in the direction we need to go in.
Hmm. Yeah. There's especially doing dream work, it's like invoking the guardian, may our doors and gates and paths be open. May the doors and gates and paths of those who wish us any harm be closed. You know, um, Threshold guardians can be guides, they can be protectors, they can fulfill all sorts of different functions. So getting to know them and honor their experience, um, and what they can do, and being in relationship, I think, is only ever a good thing.
All right. So, with all that in mind, I think we've talked this pretty thoroughly through. Any final thoughts or ideas or directions we want to take this in before we wrap up?
Mm. Enjoy the journey.
Mm, enjoy the journey. Yeah. Well, and we only get to go on this particular journey once, so it's really important to enjoy it because each day is a brand new opportunity in that journey to discover something and learn. And each night is a descent into the underworld and a rise up into the heights.
And there are some thresholds like sleep, like death, that you have to go on your own. But for the most part, there are many thresholds that you can walk in community and in partnership, and exploring those and the richness of those thresholds together, I think, is really important for these times that we're in, especially as everything is becoming kind of more uncertain. Um, there's a beauty in not being and having to do it all alone.
Mm, that is so real. All right. Well, and this is another episode of Magical Experiments podcast wrapped up. Thank you for those of you who showed up here live, and we'll see you again sometime soon in the future.
Bye.